The phenomenon of pain. Pain therapy is a healing technology. Managed pain is a panacea for many diseases. For example, according to the timeline, the following happens. After 15 minutes of kneeling, stuttering stops. A person's consciousness rises so much that mosquitoes can't land on them. After 40 minutes, the heart heats up, which clears the mind and improves vision. After an hour, possessed people's voice is quiet, and after 2.5 hours, they disappear. All demons are expelled. For example, the most aggressive ones are expelled in 3 days to 6 months, but all are expelled within 3 hours. And only a few rare ones return, and without knees, the strongest ones are not expelled at all, as long as you live on Earth. If a person with epilepsy starts using this method once a day, there will be no more seizures, and after 3 months, epilepsy is completely cured. This is something you can check right away and right here, and most importantly, a person becomes dozens of times smarter. For example, while kneeling, you realize that you are not the thought, but the creator of that thought. Any question you ask receives the most complete answer, which includes clarity, responsibility, and insight. A difficult technical text is understood after just one reading. In contrast, if you're not kneeling, the same result comes only after the 10th or 11th time. To put it in scientific terms, the following happens. A person has a subconscious defense against pain and mainly against shock, cardiac and respiratory arrest, against excessive electrical potential, and against pain, which suppresses biorhythms. But shock is a very rapid reaction to injuries. That's why, although the body releases well-known substances into the blood like adrenaline, serotonin, and other hormones, their amount is limited because pain sets in quickly. And that's why shock is dangerous. In pain therapy, pain is induced gradually in the knees and it appears after about half an hour. And that's why it's completely safe, because the body activates all its defense mechanisms and at the same time gets rid of diseases, even such as cancer and epilepsy, including in the end result. Pain is the most active stimulator of a person's health and strength. A little about pain. Pain is caused by visible and invisible destruction of tissues, nerves, bones, organs, and in the mental sphere, views, beliefs, laws, dogmas, and so on. As is known from physics, when matter decays, energy is released, which defines it as an object or a certain meaning in the mind. Pain activates the entire organism, which naturally and automatically raises the level of consciousness and electrical potentials. In this case, pain acts as a catalyst and stimulator, an accelerator of all beneficial internal processes. Metabolism speeds up, immunity increases, productivity rises, and rest time is reduced. Pain itself frees a person from many vices, such as promiscuity, irresponsibility, recklessness, unwillingness to live, the wrongness of reality, the fullness of creative and spiritual sensations, and the desire to live. Everyone knows that goodness is more enduring, resilient, and stronger, and to realize these advantages, artificial controlled and manageable difficulty is necessary. For example, you can go skydiving, go on a hiking trip, climb a mountain, do sports, hang out at the gym, pushing your body to the limit so that every day you endure muscle pain. That's why the most convenient and constantly increasing difficulty is pain, caused at will in safe areas of the body. Healing through pain, the feeling of therapy. People have known about the healing properties of pain since ancient times. A whole group of Old Testament prophets brings us evidence of a fundamentally different approach to it than the one used in modern medicine. From the depths of millennia, a time-tested method of healing reaches us. It is constantly confirmed by positive results of recovery. Safe and natural, it lets us understand the disease's essence. By creating optimal difficulties in the form of physical suffering, it allows us to harmoniously the body's internal reserves. This property is one of the main advantages of this method. Having avoided disability himself and observing positive results in many people, the author felt the need to share this with those who truly wish to heal and are ready to put personal effort into this desire realized through action. Anyone who decides to trust this method will have the opportunity to feel real positive changes in their condition during the very first use. This method cures all diseases. It is universal in that it treats all organs and systems of a person at once. For example, the usual approach treats only one organ and mainly relieves symptoms, but everyone knows that's not how it works. For example, an eye disease is accompanied by dysfunctions of at least the liver, intestines, and of course, as a result, dysfunctions of the cerebral cortex. It is especially effective in the treatment of mental illnesses, because the amazing and wonderful property of this method provides the freedom to open the way to moral revival, enlightenment of the soul, strengthening of the spirit, and humility of the mind. It allows for conscious understanding of oneself and the world, grasping their development, and using this knowledge to benefit oneself and others. The proposed principle of healing is based on the well-known fact that suffering purifies the soul, mind, and body. But voluntarily imposed physical difficulties in such a position, kneeling, allow one not to suffer. An unusual trait, being immune to physical pain, arises from a changed attitude toward pain. Positive results lead to faith and confidence, and from there, the right conclusions about the usefulness and real help. Here, the mind reacts to pain not as unpleasant suffering, but as necessary difficulties. Mastering this healing method will make it possible not to suffer from pain and mental disorders, and to consciously use painful feelings and sensations for specific purposes of cleansing, enlightenment, and healing of the body, mind, and soul. This method, with minimal violence, in humility through sacrifice, leads to purification and liberation from all kinds of evil, neutralizing their negative potential. This method was practiced by King David, who, in difficult moments of his life, consciously used pain to end mental and physical suffering. He would kneel down, and by doing so, he freed himself from the distress of mind and body. This method has found application even in our time. For example, there is a pain therapy clinic in St. Petersburg. What is the advantage of this method? Is it in its simplicity? The method does not require medication, external calming, or dependence on anything or anyone, because everything necessary is produced by the body itself under the influence of pain. It is accessible to the general public as long as you take care of your knees. To restore and improve knee health, walking is necessary. This is the most effective remedy. The main advantage of pain therapy is that it gives you the opportunity for self-regulation. In response to pain, the body begins to produce substances such as adrenaline, serotonin, and other similar stimulants which activate the internal organs. Without medication, which is ideal when using this method, it will allow healing of nearly any disease if specific requirements, conditions, standards, and time are met. However, it should be noted that extreme mental and physical damage cannot be healed at all. For example, even this method cannot restore a decayed tooth. In addition, there are diseases that can only be cured through personal effort by constantly keeping them in mind during the procedure. These include injuries and paralysis. This method generates the power to revive flesh derived from qualities like desire, will, humility, and similar traits. No one likes to experience pain initially. All living beings try to avoid it, including illnesses, which makes it possible to prevent and cure various diseases. What fundamentally changes our understanding of pain? Try it and you'll be surprised. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. For example, a person can go into shock from injuries due to sudden pain, which confirms the blocking effect of pain on the nervous system. But a person has resistance to shock, while pathogenic structures do not. That's why their nervous system gets blocked during the application of this method. Because of this property, it doesn't matter which disease, cancer, a cold-acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, or even stuttering, which can disappear in just 15 minutes. To be continued. This method cures diseases because during its use the leg muscles, nerves, and vestibular system are engaged and working. Knee pain after half an hour triggers the release of substances like adrenaline, serotonin, opiates, and morphine into the blood and nerves, which relieve pain and stimulate the body. Well, as well as many other substances unknown to science, and we now know that science actually doesn't know that much. Well, that's a little pun. Perception improves, which is the main indicator of health. As a result, there is also an increase in the perception of the color spectrum, in contrast, saturation, and brightness. Focused and volumetric vision also increase. The entire body gets a surge of vital energy, especially the brain and cerebral cortex, which coordinate all organs and systems. In this case, pain acts as a catalyst and stimulator, meaning it accelerates all beneficial internal processes. Metabolism speeds up, immunity and productivity increase, and rest time is reduced. This method also uses the scientifically known advantages of kindness over evil in terms of resilience. And since in this method a person experiences difficulties, pain and suffering that pathogenic structures cannot withstand due to their paralyzing existence, that's why they die without violence and don't come back. And this happens only with the proposed method. Events or actions like illnesses have a start and end with ongoing reactions, growth, maturity and aging between them. The use of the procedure breaks the connections of painful pathological changes because these pathogenic structures can also get sick, but unlike a person, they cannot heal. When this method is applied, all diseases, including pathological ones, are blocked from causing pain, stop acting, and become immobilized. This breaks the sequence, duration, and intensity of the illness, disrupting their development, which also contributes to recovery. It's the same as not breathing. This is exactly the state that pain therapy creates for the illness. That's why pathogenic programs are neutralized without harming internal organs, even after the first procedure. People with a sharp mind, those who strictly follow a dietary regimen, yogis, healers, and psychics note about 20 positive health effects that appear over the course of this procedure, the most important of which are described in this work. Features of kneeling. You need to kneel on both knees, immediately finding your center of gravity so that your body weight is distributed equally on each knee or adjusted depending on the pain. Kneeling on stone or ceramic tiles is easier because the cool surface relieves discomfort. You need to support yourself between the kneecaps and the bones, slightly leaning on the kneecaps. The thighs should be slightly tense due to a slight backward tilt, and your feet should be positioned horizontally, parallel to the floor. You must not put soft or thick fabrics under your knees. Regular fabric from summer pants is acceptable. You must not wear this during the procedure. Synthetic nylon, silk, or tie clothes. The skin needs to breathe. This method allows you to stand for many hours depending on your needs. The amount of time spent kneeling should be determined by the patient himself after gaining some experience. In the case of home solitude, when a person doesn't see anyone, doesn't watch television, and doesn't listen to the radio, the effectiveness increases and the time required decreases. It should be taken into account that during the first 6 months, the body undergoes a general cleansing from accumulated negative structures, so it's necessary to show persistence. Preparation for the first pain therapy session involves eliminating all problems. This means consuming water and food 2 hours before the procedure. You need to turn off your phone and prepare the necessary hygiene items, as there may be heavy salivation and tears, which you should ignore without getting involved in feelings and emotions, maintaining complete calm. Everything is done so that you don't get up during this time, which is very important because even standing up for a minute, the pain therapy session must be restarted because the neutralized mental structures of the illness will shift their consciousness to a new place. And if the session is interrupted, you can repeat it after a short break, say about an hour of rest. For fast relief from the illness, avoid leaning, resting on anything, or placing your hands on the table. Only when experiencing natural maximum difficulties, in our case knee pain, does this treatment method help. It is also necessary not to think, talk, or say anything about pain, feelings, or sensations before, during, or after the session, because this force is even harder to endure than simply bearing the pain during the procedure. A useful additional pose could be the lotus position, which has certain advantages and 3 drawbacks. The difficulty of performing it depending on the environment. The key aspect of this pose is how it exposes the biologically active points in the genital area. Since they are exposed and in an unacceptable position, they can be constantly affected by the surrounding urban environment. The advantage of the lotus pose is that it can be used during nighttime rest. It is harmonious, easy, and therefore acceptable for sedentary work and rest. The lotus pose, when used correctly and with the patient's skill, should be offered as an auxiliary position between kneeling. Worldwide, purification methods like Indian yogic catharsis and rebirthing are now being taught and practiced. These methods aim to release built-up feelings and emotions which, if not expressed, can cause hysteria, breakdowns, neuroses, or depression. Returning to pain therapy, it should be noted that if you stand for less than the minimum time of 2 hours and 30 minutes, it becomes harder to convince yourself of the usefulness and necessity of the procedure. Rising from your knees is easier if chairs or stools are placed on both sides for support. Use them only while standing up, then sit on one after the procedure for rest. First-time kneeling patients rarely last over 90 minutes as nausea and vomiting result from releasing built-up negative emotions.
Now is a good time to stand and rest.
Therefore, it is advisable to gradually increase the duration of the procedure. For example, the first session should last 1 hour and 30 minutes. If you repeat the procedure after an hour for 2 hours and 30 minutes, you won't experience any discomfort. This duration is mandatory and optimal because only this amount of time completely neutralizes all pathogenic structures, their mental programs and codes. It's hard to believe, but there are diseases that make direct contact with the mind of the sick person. The purpose of such contact is to put pressure on the person so that they don't kneel. This mental abuse can last up to 3 days, provided there is unwavering consistency in applying pain therapy and without the sick person's mind dwelling on this topic. Getting used to the pain happens with regular procedures after 3 days, but a completely undisturbed state from the pain can only be achieved after a year. Also, during the first procedures, deeply drowsy states are possible, which can be endured by focusing on some activity. Relief from voices with regular pain therapy comes after each procedure and generally within a month, and complete recovery occurs in about 3 to 5 years. If a patient with epilepsy starts to regularly use this procedure, seizures will no longer recur. The recovery time from epilepsy is 1 year. In 2 days, withdrawal symptoms are eased for drug addicts, alcoholics, and smokers. All heart diseases are cured: atherosclerosis, fibrillation, myocardial infarction, arrhythmia, hypertension, ischemia, and so on. Colds, lung diseases, asthma, tuberculosis, lung cancer. So, you can try this safe pain therapy method without risking anything, without depending on anyone, always having the healing technology with you in any situation.